guys, welcome to a novel affair.
The Bookish podcast where we kiss and tell about our torrid affairs with fictional characters.
So grab a drink and get ready for some pure, unadulterated fun. Today we are going to be talking about Flock. It is in the first book in the Ravenhood series, and it is written by Kate Stewart.
And Miss Kate is an author that got her start self published and then became really popular on Book Talk, which I think is pretty badass. Anytime somebody can, like, totally do it their own way, no compromises, I always think you get a better product. And she's actually a USA Today best-selling author. I don't know if that's the same as the New York Times, where that doesn't actually mean that they sold a bunch. It just means New York Times said. But she, in her author bio on her website, she describes her writing as sexy, messy, and angst-filled, which is
Everything that
pretty
we
much
love.
is pretty much my drag name. So, yeah, she automatically stole my heart.
I'm gonna start calling you Angsty from here on out.
Perf. So, oh, and we have the series, The Ravenhood, which is 3 books, but she
Yes.
has The Ravenhood Legacy, which is 2 additional books that we know for sure that are going to be coming out in 2025. So
I'm excited. I'm
I'm
excited for those
terrified,
books.
but
Oh, I am
the
excited.
but that tracks for how our respective reactions to a book.
You can be
So
scared and excited at the same time. Like, that
yeah,
exists in this
two
world.
two things can totally be true at once. 100%. You're absolutely right. I'm more terrified, but I digress. Um,
Fair.
so there's no trigger warnings.
Yeah.
Um,
No, like actual listing for trigger warnings. Actually, I think this book came out before a trigger warning list became like a big
a
thing
very
for smut
common
books.
occurrence. Yeah.
Yeah. I also wouldn't deem it as a dark romance, but it is still kind of dark. It has dark events, but
It's
it's not dark.
definitely like dark subject matter, like dark
Yeah,
thought themes and emotions, but not necessarily dark on the smut.
smut side. Yeah. This is like an
Although
intro into dark romance,
it's
basically.
it's like baby steps. Now I will say
Yeah.
this has a couple of the better smut scenes in my opinion across the board.
Yeah.
Despite them not being as exotic as some of the others.
It's the foreplay.
It's
It's
yeah,
definitely that.
it's for sure that. So
Now,
speaking of foreplay,
something in this book that I would deem triggering, even though it wasn't listed, is the self-sacrifice and the broken hearts that happen. It it
I
pulls at your heartstrings.
I 100% agree that although it doesn't have any like haunting Adeline level triggers, right? It
Yeah,
definitely will totally destroy you mentally and emotionally. So
yeah,
something to look out for.
yeah. It's gonna wreck you in the heart.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm pretty
a
sure I
trope
put
that is, huh?
Oh, I'm pretty sure I put in my Goodreads review that I was not adequately prepared and thoroughly devastated by this book because
Yeah,
I felt like people needed to know.
I didn't see it coming because there's no trigger warnings that it's truly going to hurt your feelings.
So bad.
A trope, it also didn't list any tropes, but a one trope that is in there is the reverse harem. Specifically, there is a threesome. So be prepared for that if you're not into the polyamorous situation. I mean, it's not wild, but it's there.
It's perfect. So I want to point out, and this is kind of a thing that I don't think I, first of all, I didn't, never heard of reverse harem before I went down the path of smut. But there's also different levels of reverse harem. So reverse harem doesn't necessarily mean everybody's all doing it at the same time together.
Yeah.
This is
Doesn't necessarily mean group schmecks. It could also just be one girl decides, why do I need to choose between these men whenever I could just individually have them both?
yeah.
But it's
So
not
it's
cheating.
it
There
does
is no
not
cheating.
mean yeah. Okay.
Like an
So
open relationship.
I can't remember now if I read this before I read Den of Vipers, but it's
I read Den of
definitely,
Vipers first.
see, I can't remember. I think I did, but I don't know.
Den
But
of
what
Vipers was my first reverse harem.
I do know that, and this is a teaser for later, this book has one of the very few smut scenes that I ever relayed to my husband in any amount of detail. And by that I mean almost line for line. I like literally retexted it to him. So, something to look forward to.
There. Um, okay, so with our take on what could be triggering out of the way, let's get into the summary of the book. It is a Robin Hood retelling with a modern day spin on a brotherhood of morally gray bad boys. So,
Yeah, yeah, the Robin Hood aspect, the Robin Hood esqueness of it is not super. It doesn't hit you over the head with it,
yeah.
but it's definitely all those elements are there. But I like that. I like that it's very. It's modernized in a really natural way. Um,
Yeah.
and when I hear Robin Hood like as a trope, I automatically think like bow and arrows, and it's not like that.
I think of the cartoon, the old cartoon.
Yes, which is, Maid Marian and the whole thing was great.
To
Um,
be clear, there are no foxes in this book, okay?
I
They
mean,
are
there's some
people.
foxes, but only in my head.
Girl.
So, okay. This I'm gonna say that there is definitely some time hopping going on
Mhm.
in this book. But you start out with her moving back to Triple Falls, which she has lived in before, which is a fictional town in North Carolina, specifically in the Blue Ridge Mountains, which are real, but Triple Falls is not. You're
You
welcome.
just had to throw that out there, huh?
Yeah, just, I like to share facts.
I also want to point out that, like, along with the Robin Hood thing, it's also a whole secret society that is nationwide, maybe even worldwide. It's unclear in this book, but it's a big thing. It's not a small operation that's happening. The summary reads as Cecilia Horner, the main female character, she moves back to Triple Falls, but it's only supposed to be temporary. She is supposed to work 1 year for her elusive, estranged father at his factory, and then once she's worked for a year for him, he will hand the inheritance over to her. Which she's only doing this not because she actually cares about the money, but because she wants to set up her mom for life because they grew up struggling financially and she wants to give back for all the sacrifices her mom made.
And mom struggles
And
with depression and mental health, which is a recurring theme. Like Cecilia had to grow up really young because her mom
yeah,
struggled. So Cecilia's kind of like, she starts out trying to save the day. She's her little like
yeah,
self story hero there in the beginning.
yeah. And the mental health and depression is mentioned, but it's not portrayed. We don't see little Cecilia going through the struggles of having a mom like that.
Correct.
She's a full grown adult, and really we only get snippets of phone conversations that are happening. So it's not depicted. Um, Now she, ends up in Triple Falls. She works at the factory, and on her first day, she kind of collides with her new supervisor. His name is Sean. He is our first male main character. He is enigmatic, charming, irresistible, and he kind of lures her into a more risque part of the world. And it's determined that she's going to make the most of it. She's going to stop living in fear. She's going to start taking risks and just live life to the fullest because she is now a grown up in her college phase, as she likes to call it.
Yes, and she was always the responsible one because she was kind of taking care of her mom also. So her experiences were limited growing up. Like she didn't go to parties, she didn't have the like young dumb kid experience. So now she wants to like make some mistakes and do some dumb shit, which I highly recommend everybody have that phase in their life. Um, so that kind of sets the tone, I think, for what you're about to get into because she's kind of willing to let her brain take a back seat for a minute.
I can totally relate to her on that end because I grew up being the responsible one and, you know, just not taking risks, not going out and doing crazy stuff. I had to stay home because of my mother as well. So I think that may be why I liked her so much was I could feel the I could feel for her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Sean invites her to a house party. The her After her first day at work, he finds her in the parking lot, invites her to a party, and that is where she meets Dominic, Sean's quote unquote brother, for the first time, and he is scary, tall, dark, and handsome, brooding. The
Male
whole
main character number two. He's our second
yeah.
male main character.
He is the black cat to Sean's golden retriever, to
Yes.
put it into
Yes.
perspective. And she starts to realize that they're keeping a secret and that they're probably into something dangerous. She doesn't really care. She's, she starts to fall in love with them. So, in light of falling in love with them, she's willing to overlook the dangers. The question is, will the dangers drag her down and risk her entire future?
I can't say anything because I know the answer, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody. So I think this book is really good for people that you are trying to get like they want to try something smutty but they're not sure. It's
You
not
want to dip your
the
toes into the dark romance.
yeah, and it's not cheesy romance. It's not some of the cheesier tropes and stuff. It's actually like the suspense thriller part of it, I think, is a really good um, balance to the smut.
Mm-hmm.
But like the smut is not lacking, and that
Yeah.
can't be understated. It's uh, Yeah, it's quality. My
I wouldn't
props
call
to
it a
Kate Stewart
slow
for that.
burn. I wouldn't call it a slow burn, but we also don't jump straight into the smut either. It there's a little bit of relationship building before it actually happens.
Yes, for sure.
Just forewarned, you're not going to jump straight into it.
I will say, and this is not a spoiler, but she's like, how old is she at the beginning of this book? 19?
She's 19. She's a few weeks away from being 20.
Yeah. So for those of us who are maybe just a little bit older than 19, there is quite a bit of sex in cars in this series. Specifically, this book in particular has a lot of car sex. And so, again, slightly, just barely older than 19 me, um, was I had to like, squint a little bit at that because that just does not sound like a good time anymore. However, it's still enjoyable.
I
Not
am
relatable,
glad
but
you bring
enjoyable.
up I am so glad you bring up her age because I will say this, and it's not going to give anything away, it's not a spoiler. But reading this at the age that I am now and looking back at my 19-year-old self compared to her in accordance to like a relationship, this author was spot on to how the teenage brain worked. Because the
Yes.
amount of like crying and like the begging and like the just the dramatics of it all, I was like, oh
The
my god, no.
internal struggle over the smallest, most inconsequential things. I think Kate does a really good job in this book of you look at Cecilia very similar to how you would look at your former self, and
Yes.
you actually start her book starts you're really 7 years into the future, and then it takes you back to her when she's 19. So I don't know,
Yeah.
it's a very like relatable because I
Even
think we can all look back at our 19-year-old selves similar to how we look at Cecilia.
and it's not just the dialogue, it's the inner dialogue. It is the
Yes.
writing style. When she is writing as Cecilia as 19, she is in the mindset of a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we are in the jump forward, you can actually see the change in age in the writing. And I love Kate Stewart because that's just, she embodied a 19-year-old. She had me looking at my
Yes.
19-year-old self like, I know I was this bad and I really wish I wasn't because, girl, what are you doing?
Yeah, but
What are you doing?
it's not cringy for me. It's not Kristen Stewart, I mean Bella from Twilight. It's it's not that level.
It's
It's
real.
endearing. It's real, it's realistic, it's endearing. It's relatable. It's not I mean there's a couple moments when I roll my eyes and we'll get to that, especially in the podcast when we go through this, because I have a particular eye rolly moment. But for the most part, it's very relatable and endearing.
To hear all of those parts, all of the uncensored, unfiltered things that we're allowed to say that we can't say on YouTube, and it has spoilers as well, go to the listening platforms that do not regulate us because you will get a ton more of all of it.
Yeah, we get to talk about all the more exciting stuff when Daddy YouTube's not listening.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to show my age a little bit here in my choice of casting.
Oh
But
my goodness.
hopefully, like, I'm not going back like Marlon Brando that far back. So we should all be able to. Um, so how do you want to do this? You want me to list all of mine and then you go, or do you want to pair off like go by character?
Let's do a character. and we
Okay.
both say who we think they are.
Well, in order of appearance, let's start with Cecilia. Who would you cast as your Cecilia?
That is so hard because, like, Cecilia at 19, I have a different picture than what I do when she's grown up.
Valid. That's valid.
Cecilia at 19, I'm thinking like Disney Channel, like
Like Hannah
maybe
Montana?
like I was thinking more like Selena Gomez in Wizards of Waverly Place, like her character
Okay.
Alex.
Okay.
I was thinking more like Alex.
Do you notice the age gap there? She basically just
I
called me old.
watch.
It's fine. It's
Hey,
fine.
Hannah Montana and Selena and Wizards of Waverly Place were on at the same time. Okay,
Okay, fine.
if we're trying to go back to like original, Selena Gomez was also in Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, which was on before Hannah
True.
Montana. So
True.
let's not get in
She
this age gap
was.
thing. I grew up poor, okay? I am the same age as you.
Well, that I can't
Excellent.
argue with. Okay. Well, my Cecilia, I think of a like Blake Lively, like very like sweet, beautiful, all American girl next door type situation. Um, I also just imagine like she's super skinny, like I want to be when I
Yeah.
grow up. So, you know,
Well, in the book, she's described as being like, I think she's like upwards of 5'6". So she's tall,
so she's a giant
and
because we're both 5 feet.
she also mentions that she's got what she lacks in the front, she makes for up in the back and in her hips. So she's like petite up top, but like voluptuous on the bottom. So I mean, it kind
Perfect.
of gives you an idea of like,
Yeah. Okay. Well, then let's move on to Sean.
well, hang on. I want to say that Cecilia's older self,
Oh, sorry.
because in my head they're two different people. There is so much growth that happens. So if I'm going based on like her personalities, it's two different people.
So yeah, so who's your second one?
I'm gonna have to say, honestly, I don't even know. I don't.
Okay.
I
Okay.
had somebody in mind,
Uh
and then you said Blake Lively, and it like threw me off, and I forgot
now
who it was.
apologies. Um so then we can move on to Sean now or
Yeah, just move on. Ignore me.
okay.
Just ignore
Um
me.
oh, okay. So I thought I had a Sean picked out in my head, but then like I was reading again and I picture Sean as like oh my god, I'm blanking on his name. The guy who plays Captain America.
If you hadn't have said that, I would have known.
Chris Evans. Oh my gosh.
I
Very
wanted to
like
say Hemsworth, and I'm like, that's not Hemsworth.
no, no. I mean, he's also an Avenger, but I think he's got this like a granola Chris Evans. He's a if Chris Evans grew up like hiking in Colorado, that's who I would cast as Sean.
I think it's funny that you chose somebody from like that genre because in my head I was picturing Chris Pratt.
Okay. Yeah.
He's like he's goofy, but he can also be like, boss if
Intense.
he needs to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm like, golden retriever, but is capable of like laying down some boundaries.
Yes.
So I chose Chris Pratt for that.
I like Chris Pratt for that. Okay, so then Dominic.
I chose, and I feel like book talk girlies are gonna laugh at me for this
I
one.
feel like I already know who you're gonna say. Go ahead.
And some of them may not even know his name, but I know they know the sound. For Dom, I thought of um Aranke. Aranke? However you say his name.
The say it again, I like that guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm gonna co-sign this completely. But when I was reading this book for the first time, and I guess you have to know about me that I've been a huge Johnny Depp fan for like years and years and years. Like, but I felt like Johnny Depp would have done such a good, like, soulful, like, introverted to the point where you are pretty sure he's mad at you, even though you've never said anything to him kind of vibe.
Are we talking young Johnny Depp or today's Johnny Depp? Because
Young
those
Johnny
are two
Depp.
different people.
They are. Well, we'll say not like What's Eating Gilbert Grape Johnny Depp. I would say more like, I
Pirates
don't
of the
know.
Caribbean age, like the first
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Pre
could see that.
like pre Fantastic
Mainstream.
Beasts. Yeah. um but I don't think we can cast anybody else without spoilers.
Okay, we could cast one more person.
Okay.
Her best friend.
Oh, yes, Christy.
Yes.
Okay, who would you cast for Christy?
For honestly, Christy reminded me of like a Jenna Ortega in
Okay.
like her Wednesday Addams phase. Not
I can see
necessarily the
that.
gothicness, but just like the blunt, off the wall commenting and the like not caring at all what she says.
Okay,
I could see
this is
that.
going to be another old one, but Christy gives me Drew Barrymore vibes.
Wow, we had totally different images. But I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah, just
The
because she's just like a,
lovingness.
yeah, and she's just like a very, I don't know, she kind of cuts through crap, which I like.
I could see that.
Um, I actually do have another character that I think is cast worthy. Roman, her dad. Who would you cast as her dad?
Let's see, who's the most dickish person I could think of? Oh, I got it. I'll cast him as my own dad. Elusive absentee father.
Okay, but if your dad is that rich, then we need to talk after this show because
Gotta find him first.
okay. Destiny's dad, if you are out there and you are rich, we would like to be friends with you. Okay. I would cast. Ugh, I'm gonna have to start looking up celebrity names better before this. Um,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what he has played in. Um, somebody. He's an older guy, and he normally plays like this really snobby, like rich character, and I feel like that's a better description than me trying to figure out like what he's been in or what his name is. But like the very posh, very like they're not super masculine, like super, like he probably gets manicures, I
I
would
feel like I
imagine.
can almost picture who you're talking about. He plays like the stereotypical older posh character.
Yes.
He's like
Yes.
skinny and tall.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I can picture him, but I can't I don't think I've ever known his name.
Yeah. He's just that like extra, yeah. So I think that that's a pretty good casting.
Yeah.
So do we want to start with the prologue? Do we want to get into this?
Yeah, why the hell not?
Okay, so this is the time warpy stuff that I was mentioning earlier.
Mhm.
We start off in present day and she's 26 and she has just broken up with her fiance and is on her way back to her father's house in Triple Falls, and she's like thinking back on her time here previously and where she feels like her story began
Yeah.
was at this point 7 years ago. And it's confusing, I think intentionally, because we don't really understand all the players and what she's on about. Um, but
It kind of the time jump kind of reminded me of how like Deadpool movies open. It's like some like dramatic scene and you're like what is happening? And then he's kind of like let me start from the beginning.
yes,
And that's
exactly.
kind of how this was.
But here's what we know. What we know, she's driving in the car, having like this inner monologue, and she knows that her fiance that she just broke up with, she never loved him the way that she could have because of this other love story that took place prior in Triple Falls. Um, she gave her heart away and never got it back. So that's literally how we roll out. Like, she's
That's
ruined
all you
for
get.
anybody else. And then it takes you back, and she's 19 again, and also moving to Triple Falls at 19 for the first time. Um,
We're going back to the beginning where it all started.
yes. And it's evident just in that prologue that she's going back to heal. She's trying to find some healing. She obviously um, thought she was moving on with Colin, her fiance, and somewhat like running from this heartbreak.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a place I can relate to. I don't know how many times I've been on a long drive and like your mind just kind of takes over in one of these like
Goes.
what am I even doing with my life kind of spirals.
Yeah.
We have to give it our overall ratings.
Yeah.
And this is overall number and then content, spice, romance, writing, and characters.
This book is very high up for me. I am in love with this whole series, even though it breaks my heart constantly.
This is
My overall
it hurts
rating,
so good series. It hurts so good.
yeah. Except there's one part that does not hurt very good.
Yeah.
The overall rating I gave it was a 9 out of 10.
Okay.
For content, I gave a 9 out of 10. For spice, I went, 7 to 8 out of 10. Because it's hot and steamy and there's a lot of buildup, but it's also not like. I mean, I've read the Lord series, so. And Haunting Adeline. You gotta be on
Same.
that level to get a 10 out of me.
That's fair.
For romance, I definitely gave it a 10 out of 10, though. It. The way she wrote the emotions just
Yeah.
made me feel them. And writing and characters, I gave them both 10 out of 10s because they were so in depth. The writing's quality and style was amazing. The characters had so much depth, and every character had a backstory, no matter how little the character was. And the arcs, the character arcs. One thing I loved, I hated it when I first read this book. One thing I loved was the fact that we didn't have a POV from anybody other than Cecilia. I usually like to have the guy POV. That's my favorite part.
Love
But
the
I
guy POV.
but I know why she didn't. She wanted the reader to be as in the dark as Cecilia was
Yes.
about the whole secret society.
Yes.
I hate it, but I respect it. I get it.
Yeah, it definitely. You cannot judge the series if you don't read past this first book. And I say that to lead into my rating because I'm going with my original gut instinct rating when my first read through of this. And you can actually, on my Goodreads, I did not rate Flock as well as I rated Exodus. And
Can you focus back in?
oh, I
You're
don't. It auto focuses, so sometimes it loses me. Um, I did not
sorry.
rate this book, but I don't think you can adequately judge this series if you were to stop at
Until you've read
Flock.
the whole thing.
Because Exodus makes Flock, elevates Flock quite a bit. So
Yeah.
I, overall, for Flock, I would have rated it when I first read it probably a 7 out of 10, which I'm probably a hard grader also. We'll see. This is our
Yeah.
first one to compare notes on, but we'll see. Um, but keep in mind that I would rate it higher after having read Exodus. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, content was, I think, I'm second guessing my numbers that I wrote, that I jotted down this morning. I think content is 8 out of 10. Spice, 8 out of 10. Um, the romance, I think, is a 9 out of 10. Um, for me, in this one, I I think both the writing and the characters, I give it a 9 out of 10. But that, again, I would change that in retrospect. But when I first
Yeah.
read it, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what has
It's like they
happened
lose
here?
that point because they were
Yeah,
secretive
like
masters.
yeah, but later on, I realized it was not just, you know,
Yeah.
confusing. It was intentional.
Book two
Which is
explains
interesting.
a lot.
I and I say all of that to say that Kate is brilliant with her ability to take you through it with the character.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I love an unreliable narrator. I think it's a really clever way to twist a story that nobody
Yeah.
sees coming because you assume the information that you're getting is accurate, right? Or complete. And so
Yeah.
um
I
I
agree with that.
think I also think that um, Exodus is the best book in this series.
Exodus hurts. Be
It
prepared.
does, but it's
It's
also
going to
the
hurt.
best writing, in my opinion.
It, yeah.
But
We'll get
we
more
can't
into
talk
that in the
any
next
more
one.
about that yet.
So that's a wrap for this episode. As always, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed our take on this very steamy book. And we will see y'all next week on A Novel Affair.
Where we will be discussing our next spicy book, Exodus of the Ravenhood series.
Don't forget to head over to our podcast to listen to a full breakdown of this book and many others with spoilers and discussions unfiltered. And you can find our link in the comments.
Be sure to like and follow us on our social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and hit that subscribe button before you go. We'll see y'all soon.